Dalton Tickerhoof had a problem. He's a wanted man, having been framed for a series of crimes he didn't commit. A man named Dr. Stephen Freeze had frozen an entire city, all under Dalton's name. He had luckily escaped both the police and the court system, but he had no idea where to turn next. He prayed for some form of miracle to help him escape this mess, and unexpectedly one came. Suddenly, rocketing from the sky, an orange and blue spaceship fell to the earth. Dalton went to investigate, only to find several amorphous pink aliens, who immediately attacked. They were about to tear Dalton to shreds when they suddenly stopped. A man wearing an orange outfit with a blue cape and a large X on his chest came from behind the aliens. How many times do I have to tell you? Breathing is not a cause for the death penalty. The man's voice seemed familiar to Dalton, who stood up and asked, Aiden? The man turned around to see Dalton, and a glow of familiarity went over his face. Dalton, is that you? The two approached each other. I thought you died in that spaceship accident. Years ago, both Dalton and Aiden had been part of a test of a new experimental spacecraft, one able to take a person outside of the galaxy. However, during the flight test, something went wrong. An asteroid came within the ship's flight path, and Dalton had to inform his friend of the incoming threat. However, that was when the emergency alarm went off. Dalton, who was autistic, immediately went into a meltdown. He tried to inform Aiden, but it was far too late. The ship was completely destroyed. Aiden nodded. I would have, if it wasn't for these little guys, he said, gesturing to the pink, somewhat homicidal aliens. They saved my life by giving me this. He pointed to the X on his chest. Not only did it keep me from, dying, but also gave me some interesting powers. He reached down, touched a piece of grass, and yelled, Absorb! Suddenly, his outfit transformed into a bright green. He then proceeded to launch several blades of grass at the sky. This gave Dalton an idea. Dalton briefly explained to Super X what his situation was, and explained what his plan was. He needed to assemble a team of heroes to capture the men who had framed him and clear his name. Super X agreed, and gave Dalton a list of heroes that he had encountered on his journeys, two of which Dalton immediately recognized as his two brothers, Sean and Maverick. He hadn't communicated with them in years, and had been unaware that they had both gained superpowers. Sean Dickerhoof had gained his abilities in a rather bizarre accident. He was merely playing football with one of his sons one day. When an asteroid came down from the sky and directly hit him. He would have died if it wasn't for a strange artifact that was placed inside the asteroid and lodged inside of his forehead. The Universal Peace. The Universal Peace was a star-shaped crystal that could grant incredible powers to anyone who wielded it. This gave Sean the ability to create light constructs, lasers, telekinesis, hydrokinesis, invisibility, teleportation, and so many more. It also happened to turn his skin blue. After he was struck by the asteroid, he was immediately captured by the Multiverse Intervention Agency, and through a contrived series of events, was forced to fight in a bizarre multiverse tournament. After escaping, he was set to protect his universe from any harm that could possibly come to it, as the mighty Universal Man. Dalton's other brother, Maverick Tickerhoof, had gotten his powers around the same time. Maverick was working as in a mission field in the jungles of India, helping the people living there get medicinal supplies and whatnot. However, one day, while he was trekking through the jungle, he found an N.E.R.D tiger tangled in a poacher's net. Without taking a second to think, Maverick freed the tiger, despite the risk of the tiger eating him. After freeing it, the tiger, surprisingly, did not eat him, but simply chuffed and wandered away. Immediately after, though, a strange humanoid panther, with lightning crackling off its fur, came down from the trees and stood before Maverick. He explained that the whole situation had simply been a moral test to see if he was worthy of gaining the power of the cataract, and that he had passed. Yes, suddenly, Maverick felt a surge of power go through him as he gained the ability to transform into a giant, monstrous red tiger with the ability to control fire. From that day on, he would defend nature from all who would wish to harm it as the Terror Tiger. After gathering a few more heroes, the fight began. Dr. Freeze had built himself a large, Yeti-like mech suit, which was freezing everything around it. Many heroes were simply frozen. Terra Tiger, as well as some other the fire-powered heroes, began to thaw their allies, but there was no match. For every one ally thawed, two more would have been frozen. Dalton, wearing his own mech armor, jumped into the fight, jumping up to Dr. Freeze's giant mech arm in an attempt to distract it. However, the mech simply batted him away, sending the mech flying. Dalton eventually landed, and luckily survived, but his mech was completely destroyed. He quickly got back to his lab, needing another idea. He frantically searched his storage room to see if he had any spare weapons lying around, only to find an old comic book. It was a comic that he had written in the 3rd grade. As an autistic child, he didn't have that many friends throughout his school years, and decided to make his own through comics. He wrote himself into the comics as a character named N.E.R.D, who could transform into any dinosaur, or prehistoric reptile if you wanted to be technical. Oh, he would also face down many villains, all based on bullies who would torment him throughout his elementary school years. Reflecting upon this gave him an idea. Dalton quickly built a prototyped suit that could inject him with any dinosaur DNA he put into it. This would give him the abilities of the character he had written for himself in the comics. He quickly transformed into a pterodactyl and flew back into the battle, ready to fight as the dynamic Dino Dude.